Our motion was throwing a football, and we compared somebody throwing with shoulder pads and somebody throwing without shoulder pads.
Our research question was, how do shoulder pads affect the throwing motion, displacement, and velocity while throwing a football versus someone who is not wearing shoulder pads?
Our hypothesis was, if we calculate and obtain different data comparing shoulder pads versus no shoulder pads, then the shoulder pads will affect all throwing values in a negative way.
But you will remember me for centuries. Just one mistake is all it will take. We'll go down in history. Remember me for centuries.
This picture includes Herschel Walker from 1994 and Marshawn Lynch from 2014, and it shows that Herschel Walker's shoulder pads are significantly bigger than Marshawn Lynch's.
In college, Tim Tebow's unconventional throwing motion took roughly 0.6 of a second to complete. About 0.2 of a second slower than the average for all the NFL quarterbacks we've analyzed. On his pro day in 2010, Tebow unveiled what was supposed to be a new and improved throwing motion, bringing the ball up roughly 12 inches higher after the snap. This allowed the ball to travel 25% less distance through the motion, and he appeared to shave roughly 10% off his typical release time.
Our analysis of this video showed that Tim Tebow's throwing motion had a release time of 0.2 seconds slower than the average NFL quarterback, and after changing his throwing motion, moved the ball 12 inches higher, allowing the ball to travel 25% less of the distance through the motion, and shaved off 10% of his release time.
Both have hands that are about 10 inches wide, bigger than much taller quarterbacks like Colin Kaepernick and Matt Ryan. Manziel's quickness is also similar to Wilson's. Like Wilson, Manziel can get off a pass about 13% faster than the average NFL QB.
Our analysis of this video showed that Russell Wilson was compared to Johnny Manziel in hand size, height, and throwing quickness. They can get off passes 13% faster than the regular quarterbacks. And Colin is also a similar size to Johnny Manziel. We conducted our tests at Kusel Stadium and had Colin throw from the 20 and 50-yard line. The shoulder pads we used were the school's football shoulder pads made by Schutt. They had a 28-inch in length and covered Colin's shoulders. The shoulder pads extended 10 inches over Colin's shoulder and onto his arm. The points plotted from the ball shows us that when Colin wore the shoulder pads, his movement was more unnatural and not as smooth. This graph from Logger Pro shows us the delta y, or the parabolic curve made by the ball in mid-flight, whereas we can measure the delta x, or distance that the ball traveled, by looking at the video and looking at the yards marked on the field. In conclusion, the values measured without shoulder pads were least affected than with the shoulder pads. This proves our point that shoulder pads more affect the football player in a negative way.